Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza, and I bring you each week a discussion around a key concept in the world of cloud native computing, DevOps, and we cover a range of topics ranging from security to networking to data management and just a whole lot more. If you heard our past episodes, you know what we're all about. And so, if you like these conversations, go subscribe wherever you're listening, Spotify, YouTube. If you haven't already, go and subscribe and follow what we do. I'm really excited about today. I get to talk to someone who's building a cool product in the niche of authorization. And we've already featured quite a few startups from this space in the past few months. You can go back and check on some of them and their approach. So we're excited to really hear from someone at AuthZed. That's AuthZed. That's the company name, and the URL is authzed.com. Yeah, that's the URL as well. I have with me co-founder and CEO of AuthZed, Jake Moshenko, who's here to give us a lowdown on just what they're up to, their approach to authorization, and just everything that they're interested in. So it's going to be an interesting conversation if you work in the space of authorization. So listen in today. With that said, Jake, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited for the conversation.
All right. There's a lot of attention around authorization, and there's been a lot of activity as well. I really like that there's a lot of consolidation in the space, with the CNCF coming in and with even multiple vendors kind of coming together to establish standards. So I can see a lot of activity happening in the space, especially in the past year or so. And it's really exciting to see that, because I heard one guest say that, authentication is a solved problem, but authorization isn't as solved. And so, it really is the need of the hour when you think of that. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about your approach to authorization and get into some of the details of, how you think of authorization and your views on it. Before we get started into all that good stuff, though, I want to just, you know, uh, hear a bit about your background and just your journey to co-founding AuthZed.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the journey actually probably starts with our last company.
Hmm.
Last company, we built a product called Quay. I was one of the co-founders
Ah,
along
I remember that.
with, you're familiar with Quay?
Yeah, which one was it? CoreOS?
Yeah. So, well, actually, Joey, who's our current CTO, and I co-founded Quay. It was a two-person company. And then we
Okay.
sold it to CoreOS when we were still a two-person company. Uh,
Oh, okay. All right, all
And
right.
and so Jimmy, who's our third co-founder at AuthZed, was actually our first hire once we were acquired by CoreOS. So all three of us have been working in this domain for a super long time together. So
Yeah.
happy that you've heard of Quay. But Quay was the first private Docker registry. And if you
Hmm.
think about what separates a private Docker registry from a public Docker registry, it's authorization, right? So we didn't think about it in those terms back then. We were just like, oh, we've got this niche, we've got authorization that we've got to throw on the product. We'll just copy a model that everyone's familiar with, and we'll go from there. And the first feature request that we started getting in where this is great, but I need organization support. I need team support. I need to model my org chart in this product, right? I can't just create a container in my own personal namespace and somehow share that with my whole company. So what ended up happening is we had to like go back and rewrite the authorization code in Quay many times to try to keep up with these feature requests. And each time it was this sort of annoying, security sensitive operation to have to rewrite this code. And like each time it's like, all right, this is the last time I'm rewriting the authorization code, which never ended up being true, right? So we've been struggling with this problem for a really long time. And then in 2019, when Google published their Zanzibar paper, talking about how Google does authorization for everything internally, I read the paper and I was immediately I could immediately map that back to the problems that we had been facing at Quay, and then later on at CoreOS and the more broad organization, even after we were acquired by Red Hat, like continuing to build out products, authorization was always a struggle. So I read the paper and immediately mapped that back and said, this is great. This is flexible. It's scalable, high uptime, high availability. So we should go and we should build a company that uses the principles from this paper to solve authorization. So we've been doing it kind of ever since.
Wow, really interesting. Wow, so cool. I remember like I was writing back about a decade ago when, Docker was on the scene, just up and coming. And so I covered Quay. And yeah, it was one of the cool Docker products. And so, yeah, really excited I get to talk to one of the creators. That's amazing. So the Zanzibar paper, yeah, you kind of touched on like some of the key ideas from it that inspired you, uh, availability, uptime. Could you dive a little bit more into some of those principles from the paper that, were kind of an aha moment that helped you, to want to create something like AuthZed?
Yeah, of course. I think the really special thing about the Zanzibar paper is first, it's not built around one of the traditional models that everybody thinks about for authorization. Everyone thinks about RBAC, which is I'm going to store some stuff in my database to associate users with a role. And then in my software, I'm going to evaluate that role to make a decision. And then the other big paradigm is policy engines, right? So if you want to break that down to sort of first principles, that's I'm going to write a computer program and I'm going to feed a bunch of data into the computer program and it's going to make a decision. And then I'm going to apply that decision in my software. And in the Zanzibar paper, the approach that they chose to use internally at Google is called relationship-based access control. And so what you do in relationship-based access control is you're building a graph out of the relationships between people and other people, people and data, data and other data. Just a quick example, right? Like this document is contained by folder 123. Folder 123 is embedded in the engineering folder, which is in the product team's Google Drive, which is shared with these 5 teams, and they've got these 25 members. Those are all relationships that we're building up between data and people. And then in the Zanzibar model, you walk the graph to try to make an access control decision. And that was so transformative to me because you're not baked into a model. Like with RBAC, you usually pick like, we're going to have reader, writer, admin. And everything's got to fit into one of those 3 roles. Is this a reader, a writer, or an admin operation? But with relationship-based access control, everything is just so wide open and so flexible. You can model all kinds of authorization models, including RBAC, right? Like RBAC is a strict superset of RBAC. So it was just such a flexible model that could be applied to so many different domains. Like at Google, they use it for Google Cloud IAM, they use it for YouTube, they use it for Google Drive, they use it for Google Groups, right? It's the same technology underpinning all of these technologies with vastly different authorization requirements. So that was the first part. The second part, so we've got the model in place. The second part is, how do we actually scale this thing? How do we make it reliable? And unlike some papers, which just talk about the model or sort of like the math, the relational algebra behind a particular model, they actually laid out how we scaled this thing, or how they scaled this thing at Google to support billions of users and tens of billions of documents at millions of queries per second. And so combining those 2 things together was really just a great blueprint for building a new foundational piece of infrastructure technology that everybody can adopt for their authorization needs.
Wow, really interesting. So you might have explained it, but I kind of didn't get it fully. This concept of relational-based access control, RBAC. If you could tell me how, in more practical ways, it differs from RBAC and the possibilities beyond RBAC. I'm just curious to know more about it.
Yeah, I think the biggest changes are that you have a lot more flexibility in how you interpret relationships. Like for RBAC, let's just take the naive example, right? Like you have a platform, and the platform has reader, writer, admin. Okay. So everybody in your organization who signs up for this platform is going to be assigned reader, writer, or admin. But even that is like very obviously insufficient, because it's like usually you want to break that down into subsets of data or data that only that person has created, or you want to align it around business units in your organization. So there's already a contextual aspect that comes into even this concept of like standard RBAC. And so now we've got like, all right, well, it's RBAC, but constrained to this particular paradigm or this tree or this subtree or something like that. So you can already see how like the RBAC model starts to drag you along this path of like trying to make RBAC more and more fine-grained to address your business needs. And with relationship-based access control, all of that is just inherent in the model itself. So you can define things like this person can be a reader of a folder, and this person can be a reader of a document. And if a document is nested under a folder, if you're a reader on that folder, that should imply, or maybe should not imply, depending on your domain, that a person can be a reader on a document that exists within that folder. I'll give you an example. This is usually very client specific. When you're talking Google Docs, you know that if you get reader on a folder, you get reader and everything under that, right? But in some domains, like think legal firms, like legal documents, just because you are able to move documents around doesn't mean you should be able to necessarily read the contents of those documents if they're sensitive contracts or they deal with legal proceedings, things like that. So each business basically has to come up with this model all by themselves. And RBAC is so flexible that all of those businesses can effectively model what they're trying to do and put that into their software and have success. And then, by the way, they get all of the other benefits of having centralized authorization, which I think we're going to dive into in a few minutes.
All right. Yeah, that's a great example talking about like a legal use case. So, so you guys have built SpiceDB since then, right? Which is the open source foundation, I guess, for your product, if I'm right. Talk to us a bit about that and how SpiceDB puts into into action some of these principles and ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to refer to SpiceDB as our love letter to the Google Zanzibar paper. So it is a open source implementation of most of the concepts that are in the Zanzibar paper. We decided early on that the right paradigm for thinking about this kind of authorization infrastructure is to think about it like a database. So hence the DB. Before that, people were thinking, all right, well, how do I feed my data to this engine? They were thinking in terms of this is an engine instead of this is a whole cohesive bundled solution that brings data and policy together. So we called it SpiceDB. And then all of a sudden, overnight, people were like, okay, I understand. I'm writing data to this thing and I'm getting answers back from it. So that was an important part of the genesis. And then the other thing was that we realized that adopting a database is not an easy decision. And so as a company, as a business, I want assurances. I want to know what the quality is of this technology that I'm adopting, first of all. And then I also want to know that like if this vendor turns into a bad actor, I have an escape hatch. And so making it open source and just putting all of our cards on the table and saying like, we think this is the right way to do it. Here's the code, take a look. When you come buy it from us, we think that's the right thing to do. But it's fully open source. You can take it, you can do whatever you want with it. And that's just been a tremendous unlock for us in terms of mind share and top of funnel and all those things.
Oh, really interesting. Yeah. So that's interesting how just positioning, a great example of how product positioning really matters and just, a single word to just say that this is not what it is, but this is what it is can just change the whole perception around it. Great example there, engine to database.
It's one of those, one of
Talk
the
us
two
little-
hard problems in computer science, right? Naming things and cache invalidation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Talk to us a bit about how SpiceDB handles these specific things that you mentioned, which is especially reback and scale, which were two of the key things that you got from the Zanzibar paper.
Yep.
Talk to us about the approach, the design, the design decisions that you had to make while creating SpiceDB.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about authorization is in the line of fire for almost every user interaction on a platform, right? So I want to open a document. Okay, am I allowed to? I want to share this thing. All right, am I allowed to? Who am I sharing it with? Now they get access, right? So all of these things you're in the line of fire for that. So latency becomes king. So everything that we do takes into account how much latency we're adding to that overall user interaction. And a lot of the design decisions sort of stem and they flow down from there. So one example of a design decision was we're primarily built around gRPC as our protocol. gRPC is built on top of HTTP2. HTTP2 allows you to have long-lived connections that you can pipeline requests. You can have multiple requests in flight. You can do all of these great low latency things because you've got these long-lived connections, right? So that's just one example of how we bring that principle to life. Another example is we have a really extensive hotspot caching solution in SpiceDB. So in SpiceDB, we break down problems from top-level problems into smaller problems. And then we farm those smaller problems out to other SpiceDB nodes, right? So if you're familiar with Cloud Native, that's like east-west traffic. So SpiceDB nodes are talking to other SpiceDB nodes. And each one is working on their own little subset of the problem and then sending the answer back to be aggregated. I'll give you an example of that. We talked earlier about a document is in a folder, and then a folder is shared with a team, and then a person is on a team, right? So the top level question is this person allowed to view this document? And a sub question might be, is this person allowed to view documents in this folder? And then a sub problem of that, once you've identified what teams are in that folder, a sub problem of that would be, is this person on a team that's allowed to view documents in this folder? So in that way, we break the problem down into smaller bite-sized chunks and we farm them out and we compute those answers, but we reuse those answers as well. So if you ask for information that shares any subtree, any of these subproblems at all, we'll have the answer all ready to go in cache, and we can reduce latency additionally that way. So that's a really fundamental principle for making this thing scalable and eliminate tail call latency problems. The other thing is we use the concepts of consistent hashing and distributed systems to make sure that it's very high availability. So like I said, SpiceDBs talk to other SpiceDBs, and they do so, they're all very neutral, right? Like each node is not specialized. So you can put these things behind a load balancer, and any SpiceDB instance can pick up the problem and start farming it out to its peers to get the answers. So that's some of the ways that we make it more scalable and lower latency to give the best possible client experience.
All right. Wow, those are some really cool things and some really good insights about just building a product that you shared there, and just SpiceDB, the approach you guys have taken. So it's open source, and you mentioned as well just the importance or the seriousness of adopting an open source project and the things you considered, and that's really good to know. Are you also involved in some of the activity around the? I think there's an open community-led an industry-supported spec for authorization that's kind of being formed right now in the past few months. And are you involved with that already or not yet? Is that on your radar at all?
Yeah, you're probably referring to AuthZed.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Very, very unfortunately named AuthZed as opposed to AuthZed. Yeah, we keep track of it. We're not a part of that committee or that group or whatever you want to call it. I know one of the founding members of that group was a company called Acerto, and they recently ceased operations. I don't have inside baseball.
They ceased operations recently?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow. We had them on the talk a while back. Wow, I didn't know. Okay. That's news to me. All right. Yeah. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. The efforts that they're trying to do is really interesting. They're trying to distill what is the minimum viable spec for a single permissions check. And that's important, right? That is sort of like the core or the crux of the problem. But we have all kinds of other APIs that we've built around that our customers and our experience in industry have told us are equally as important, right? Being able to ask who is allowed to access this thing, not just is this person allowed to, but who out of all of the people are allowed to access this, or what are all of the things that this person is allowed to access, right? So we call those our lookup APIs. We also have batch queries that are higher level than our lower level checks. So it's like, while it's an important subcomponent of a complete authorization system, we don't think that the spec is going to sort of like light the world on fire and make things totally portable, because all of these other APIs are just as important. And it's really important for us to be able to work with our customers to make the APIs like as precise and as easy to use as we possibly can.
Really interesting. Okay, okay. Wow, and surprised to hear the news. We had Omri Gazit about a year ago on the show, so yeah, didn't know that. So okay, wanted to talk a bit about just authorization in practice. So what's it like for teams? Because a lot of teams still probably the majority are trying to build their own auth logic, trying to do it the manual way, DIY, and running into challenges. Talk to us a bit about just the things that you see as you speak to your prospects, your customers, what's happening, and talk to us about some of the signs that people should be aware of, that if you're doing this, you should probably consider centralizing your authorization and doing it the right way. Talk to us a bit about those things.
Yeah, there's a few key benefits that you get from centralizing authorization. And there's various approaches to even centralizing authorization. But the key benefits are you have uniform policy that can apply anywhere, right? That can be interrogated and apply anywhere. So an example of that would be like you always have the exact same policy being applied for who's allowed to open a document, right? Before abstracting authorization out into a different piece of infrastructure, you would be writing that code and distributing that code down into every single piece of software that needs to be able to answer that question, right? And that might be, that might be dozens of services depending on how your organization is architected. And so by centralizing it, you have this uniform way of managing who can get access to what. And that gives you access to flexibility, right? So if I want to change who can get access to what, I don't have to rewrite a library and recompile it into all my apps and redeploy them all. I can just change it in this centralized place. A great example of this that I like to use, again, because people can empathize or they understand Google paradigms. When you send an email and there's a link in that email to a doc and a recipient does not have access to that doc, Gmail will tell you, right? They'll say, hey, one of your recipients doesn't have access to this doc. And then Gmail will also let you mitigate it right there. They'll also say, would you like to share it with them right now? Think about what that would be like if the logic for who has access to a doc was locked up inside the doc service. You would be writing a custom API to enable this workflow, to export that logic, or the docs authorization logic would be compiled into a library. And to change it, you'd have to recompile and redeploy all of these different components across all of your infrastructure, right? So by centralizing it, you really pick up a lot of flexibility. And the other key benefit for centralizing it on our model, or on a Zanzibar model, is we put the policy, we call them schemas, but we put the policy and we put the data together. And that means that we can actually cache that information, like I was talking about earlier with hotspot caching. We can cache that information in a very smart way, a very flexible way. We actually offer user-controlled consistency. So the user can say, I need this to be immediately consistent, or the user can say, I can accept some eventual consistency in the name of performance. But that's only enabled by having the data already together with the policy. If you're bringing the data to the policy, then it could change every time. And you can't make any assertions about what the data might be the very next time you get called. So those are kind of the two key benefits. If you're trying to identify, like, is this a problem that I have? Is this a problem I'm trying to solve? Some questions you might want to ask yourself are, how much of my developer's time is getting spent writing and rewriting authorization code, right? That's what we were doing way back in the day with Quay. You might want to ask yourself, is my authorization model or is my permissions model limiting my ability to sell to certain classes of customers? Excuse me. One of the key things that we try to help our customers do is break into the enterprise. And there's a really interesting thing where each enterprise has their own idea about how the authorization in their vendor's software should work. And so by adopting a flexible centralized platform like ours, you can set yourself up to either be nimble or dynamic or support things like user-defined roles that can help you sell into more businesses. So that's another one. Is this holding me back, right? Could I make more money if I had better authorization? And then the final one is my authorization slowing me down, right? Remember we talked about this is in the line of fire for every single user request. Are my users being given a bad experience because the authorization logic is getting in the way, is too slow, is slowing them down. So I think those are kind of three things that you could look at to ask yourself.
All right, all right. Yeah, those are quite practical and very relatable things that I think anyone listening to this can really check to see their own operations and their own systems. How does it fare against this criteria? So that was really useful there. One thing that I wanted to touch on is just this the more recent, advent of AI and just AI workloads, especially RAG and agentic AI that's really gaining momentum these days. So that brings in new challenges with authorization. And, with it gaining momentum, it's probably on a lot of people's minds. How do we do authorization right for AI? What stays the same? What's different? What are you seeing when you see people build for AI today? How is authorization serving that need? How is it different?
Yeah. When you first brought up AI, I was gonna play a little practical joke and pretend I had never heard of it. But honestly, it's all anybody wants to talk about for the last several
Yeah.
years, right?
Yep, yep. Can't go to
Yeah,
a
I think
conference
that
without.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying you can't go to a conference without hearing it these days.
Yeah. Uh, we're actually, we're critical to
Mm,
making AI adoptable in the enterprise.
mm,
And I'll give you some examples. We actually have a case study on our website. We have OpenAI as a customer. We're very
oh,
proud of that. It's taken us kind of a long time to be able to talk about that,
mm,
but we're finally there. And we're
mm,
helping OpenAI secure data that they're bringing in through their RAG pipeline. And we're making it so that as they bring data in and consume it into their vector DB, we're helping them enforce the original policies that were in place on the upstream data sources before they consumed them into their vector DB. So we're
mm,
flexible enough. Think about that. That means that AuthZed is flexible enough to model all of the upstream data sources that they're connecting through this RAG pipeline. So that's
mm,
just one way, right? Like helping you secure your RAG pipeline and make sure that models are only getting access to data on behalf of the users who are submitting queries. And
mm,
another thing that people want to talk about a lot now is agentic AI, non-human identity, right? How are we thinking about when we set one of these agents loose on the world? How does that agent get authorized to access data? In what ways are we limiting it? In what ways is it similar to a human? In what ways is it different to a human?
mm, mm,
And a lot of these actually like boil down. Some of them boil down to technical challenges where we can jump in and help, right?
mm,
Put all of your MCP calls, like build AuthZed checks into all of your MCP calls so that when an AI tries to invoke a tool, we are verifying that that model or that agent actually has access to invoke that tool, right? Those are
mm,
the simple technical things. And these are super important, right, for enterprise adoption. But sometimes these questions really boil down to like metaphysical or like existential questions, right? Like if I put an agent into my infrastructure and the person who deployed the agent leaves the company, what should happen, right? Or like,
mm,
what does it actually mean to have non-deterministic behavior from something that I'm deploying? There's no throat to choke, right? Like the agent doesn't care if I fire it. I can't sue it, right? Like there's all kinds of these
mm,
interesting other questions that I think are going to have to get worked through. But
mm,
we're definitely doing our part in helping secure the interface between the agents and data and agents and other agents and things like that. So it's
mm, mm.
great, huge driver for business for us and a great up and coming area. We'll be talking a lot more about pretty soon.
Oh, really interesting there. And do you see these AI agents, you mentioned that you kind of see them as non-human identities in the way that they function and in the way they access and could you tell us some more about just how they behave like non-human identities and how they're different from human identities and in other words, authorization for humans that we traditionally are aware of?
Yeah, well, I already touched on some of it. But the
Mm,
thing about humans are that they have like a very known, predictable set of needs, right?
mhm,
Like humans want to keep their jobs because they want to be able to feed their families, right? Humans don't
mm,
get sued. Humans have to sleep. Humans can only work at human speed, right? So there's a lot of things about humans that the work, like organizations and the workforce are set up around, right? Like we know this employee isn't going to do something super nefarious because they signed a contract and we called their references and all these kinds of things, right? None of that exists with a non-human identity, right? You can't sue an agent that you deployed, or if you did, it would just come back to you, right? So a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how do we map these agents back to humans that are responsible for them, right? How do we maintain having a throat to choke in regulated industries, right? Like it's very important to always be able to assign ownership and blame in a regulated industry. So like, how are we thinking about that? How are we attacking that as an industry? I won't claim that I have all of the answers for these things, but there's definitely a lot of non-human, there's a lot of obvious differences between human and non-human identities. Specifically from the authorization perspective, I think the biggest thing that we're sort of tracking is for non-human identity. Like I always use the paradigm of these things are like interns, right? And so imagine what would an organization look like if you were hiring 1,000 interns every hour, right? What would that imply? What would that require in terms of guardrails and in terms of authorization and onboarding and offboarding? And that's really like the paradigm that I use to think about what are the next set of challenges, right? So you want things to be highly scalable, right? Interns have infinite energy and we're hiring 1,000 of them an hour. So we need our authorization system to be able to keep up with that kind of traffic and be able to make determinations. That's just one example.
Yeah, yeah. Great. I want to ask about coming to, SpiceDB, which we spoke about, and then, but you also got your product on top of that. AuthZed Cloud, is that a recent launch that you just announced? Could you talk a bit about that and just what it adds on top of SpiceDB?
Sure. In order to talk about AuthZed Cloud, though, I have to talk about AuthZed Dedicated first.
Okay.
So our flagship product right now is AuthZed Dedicated. And
All right.
AuthZed Dedicated it's a managed version of SpiceDB. So we carry the pager, we run it. We have a few pieces of software that we hold back that are very business focused, right? Like authorization around authorization, audit logging, some things like that. So we take that SpiceDB and we manage it on your behalf, right? So you don't have to carry the pager, you don't have to spin up the infrastructure. We're the experts at running SpiceDB, so just let us do it, right? The special sauce behind Dedicated is that through the work that we did at CoreOS and developing software operators, Kubernetes operators, we're able to operate AuthZed Dedicated fleets as single tenant installs. So we'll go and we'll put AuthZed Dedicated right next to your workload, wherever it is in any of the 3 major cloud providers. And then we'll give you a virtual private link back to your VPC, right? So you can use it just like it's sitting in your infrastructure, but we're the ones who carry the pager and make sure that it's healthy and keep it up and running and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's AuthZed Dedicated. It runs right next to your workloads. AuthZed Cloud is AuthZed Dedicated, but we run it in sort of centralized popular areas to make it more accessible, more democratized, right? AuthZed Dedicated is an enterprise product, and it comes with an enterprise price tag. AuthZed Cloud, we wanted to be able to get this power and this managed service and this ability to think about your authorization this way in as many hands as possible. And so we built AuthZed Cloud, which allows us to amortize out the costs of spinning up an entire control plane for each customer, right? So now we're just having one control plane in each of these handpicked regions, and we can offer it at a much more compelling price point. But it has all of the same power as AuthZed Dedicated. You're still managing things. The SpiceDBs that you run are still single tenant. Your data store is still single tenant, right? So you get a very high quality experience just at a much lower price point.
Oh, really interesting. Wow. Yeah. So then how would people choose between dedicated and cloud then? Because it seems like it's quite a close competition in terms of like what you get.
Yeah. Dedicated would be for people who need multi-region support, right? Like active, active, active. We have some customers with up to like 6 or 7 regions where all of the SpiceDBs are talking to the exact same distributed data store under the hood. Dedicated is for people who need that private networking back to between your VPC and Dedicated's VPC. So with AuthZed Cloud, you're talking over the internet. yes, if you're running in the same AWS region, your traffic is very unlikely to leave the AWS data center, but there's no guarantees about that. So people who need that private networking. And then we have a lot more knobs that we can tune on dedicated for those enterprise use cases where we can spin certain things up or change certain flags. But I think for most people, I think AuthZed Cloud is a quite compelling solution. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you need those features, you know you need them. And if you don't know that you need them, cloud is probably your new home.
Makes sense. Makes
Oh,
sense.
the one thing, of course, I missed, if you need a region that we're not currently offering cloud in, right? You can request it, we'll put it on our wait list. But if you need a region, let's say we don't get a lot of requests from South Africa, right? So if you need us to spin up a region in South Africa, we can do that on dedicated, and it'll be probably quite a while before we offer that in cloud.
Oh, okay, okay. All right. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. So yeah, winding down, last couple of questions, I guess. Um, Talk to us about some of the things that your customers notice when they start using AuthZed in the first month or so. What are some of the drastic differences that they see? Some may be expected, but talk about maybe some of the ones that they didn't expect. Just trying to understand the before and after and the kind of what the result, the end result actually is.
Yeah, we got this great analysis where someone told us before it used to take me several months to make a change to my authorization because I had to
Mhm.
write the code, and that was the easy part. And then I had to validate it, and then I had to deploy it in staging, and then I had to validate it again, and then I had to deploy it in production, and then I had to validate it again. And like with AuthZed, I can do it in days, right? I make the change to the model. I change my app to start writing any new information that's required to the change, and I'm off to the races, right? And we provide all of that validation infrastructure and everything that you need to know to be able to make those changes with high confidence. So I think that flexibility is one of the things that pops out to people. And then the other thing is, if you're a big business and you're struggling with scaling your authorization, just how fast it is can be really impressive. So we have one customer, and I don't want to pretend that this is representative, but there's a case study on our website from a company called Turo. They're a ride sharing platform, not ride sharing. They're a car subletting platform. You can think of them as Airbnb for cars, right?
Right.
They deployed onto SpiceDB, and they were seeing like sub 3 millisecond response times for their authorization checks. And that includes, all of the data is already there. So that includes the network hop, that includes everything. We generally guide people to think about it in terms of like 20 milliseconds, 25 milliseconds as an average check. But for them, they just saw incredibly fast performance, and were just so happy with the results that they had seen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great, great. What's one thing you'd like people to take away from this conversation? I know we touched on a bunch of different things, some foundational ideas behind just authorization, and spoke about AI, and even just what you built and how you approached authorization itself. A lot of things that we touched on, and just a lot of value in this conversation that we got. If you were to leave people with one thought, what would that be?
Yeah, I think, and this applies both for AI as well as traditional sort of authorization use cases, but I think my one piece of feedback would be to authorize as close to the use site as possible. And that will open up all of the flexibility doors for you, right? So I'll give you an example. One way to do authorization for an agent might be to bake a JWT that has a bunch of claims in it that represent things that that agent should be able to do, right? And if you bundle that with the agent, and then the agent presents that as a bearer token, right, to say, let me do this thing, here's my JWT that proves that I can do that. That's very inflexible, and you end up encoding a lot of data in that JWT that you don't need. You should think about it in reverse. You should flip the model on its head. And when that agent is reaching out to do something, or when a human is reaching out to do something, at that point, and only at that point, should you ask, is this person allowed to do this thing? Because that'll give you the best response time in terms of changes that have been made. That'll give you the highest amount of flexibility. You won't be baking a bunch of assumptions about what might be needed into the outset. And this applies both with like baking tokens, or like writing code to interpret relationships. Like you want to keep that enforcement point as small and as laser focused as possible to be able to go back and reap all of these other benefits.
All right. Wow, that's really useful. Thanks for sharing all of that. As we wind down, just last thing that I want to ask is for someone who's excited to know more, just get started and just try, take the product for a test run. What's the best way for them to get a feel for the product?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our users get their start by just hopping onto our playground. We run a playground at play.authzed.com. And then they take what they learned there and they'll either go over to AuthZed Cloud or they'll go with the open source, download the open source and take what they've developed, their model and their data, and put it all into the open source product and just see how it feels. It's great for us, right? We love it when people join a call and they're like, hey, we're already successful with SpiceDB. Now we just want a business partner. And that's what we're here for.
All right. All right. Wow, that's cool. Play.authzed.com, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Wonderful. With that, we come to the end of this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us, Jake. It was a pleasure chatting with you, getting to know about your origins with Quake and just your approach to authorization. Really cool stuff. Great to see the open source foundations. And congrats on your recent launch as well with the cloud variant of your product. Sounds like some really exciting times for you and your company. Wish you the best and do come by again after a few months, a year or so, to tell us about what more you guys have been building and working on.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to it.
All right. And thanks to all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jake from AuthZed. Go and check out their product if you found their approach interesting and something that you'd like to know more about. And we hope we'll see you on the next episode. See you then. Bye bye.